because I like to talk about the kind of things that people get into where they find that they're sort of going along with something that might not really be healthy for them, and it's not something they were gonna do. They got manipulated in some way.
Hmm.
Um, and so mind control is manipulating thoughts, beliefs, or behaviors through psychological techniques.
Sure.
And that happens in a lot of different ways. Like for me, I was born into this group called Homestead Heritage,
Hmm.
and my family got out when I was 13. And once we had gotten out, I had no frame of reference for anything outside of the group because one of the techniques that Homestead Heritage uses to control people is uh, isolation.
Yeah.
So, for instance, I didn't go to school. Um,
Like homeschooled.
Loosely using that term, I would say more like not schooled at all.
Okay.
But
Oh.
I mean, I was taught how to write and read and do basic math.
But they weren't really worried about the arts and probably reading what they wanted you to read, I'm sure.
Right. Like when I was 13, I had basically no idea of geography or history. Um, so this sort of like complete void that I was in,
Hmm.
um, just socially. But forgot where I was going with that. But basically, just to give you an idea of kind of like where I am coming from with it, I guess.
Sure.
And but the thing is with people that come out of these groups, they tend to make it all about themselves and their story.
Right.
So I don't want to do that. I want to make it about other people's stories and, you know, just bringing awareness to it so people can think like, well, maybe that relationship that I'm in is actually controlling, or maybe that multi-level marketing thing that looked good on paper is actually like turning me into something that I don't
Oh,
like.
no, sure, absolutely. We're assaulted day in, day out by a million different screens and a million different sound bites. I mean, it's all the time. And if you own a cell phone, if you use a cell phone, I'm using a cell phone right now. You're probably getting updates about what's happening in the world, or if you're depending on what you follow, it could just be cat videos, but you're constantly inundated with information at this point. And a lot of that information is nefarious, and that's on purpose. And it until you start actually looking at it, you don't look at it because we're taught to consume, and it's not just the the consummation of foods and beverages, but also what people want you to think, what people want you to say, how they want you to say it. It's across that board.
Yeah, in the era of political correctness, mind control is very subtle, and it's kind of
Oh,
this
sure.
like groupthink type of thing to reference like 1984,
Hmm.
um, where
But it's true.
people,
I mean, double speak, things that mind. What do they call it? Thought police. Those things are.
yeah,
I mean, if you say something online, if you use the internet, if you're out there, it's out there forever, and that includes how you buy your food, where you buy it, how often you buy it, everything that's done with a card, the little chips in the card. Now, everything is recorded somehow.
right. Yeah, it's like what like how can you even be yourself anymore? Do you know what that is? And like we're especially kids that are growing up in it. I can't even imagine because like I think one of the positive things about growing up the way I did was I just to look at it in a different light.
Hmm.
I I was able to just be myself with like none of these influences, so that could be something that has helped me to develop a strong personality later on.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, And then we were talking, I forgot how it came up. How did we even Oh yeah, it was that meme when everyone else in your camp group is hyped up on amphetamines, but you have ADHD, so you're just mellow with clear thoughts for once.
Yeah, see, I think we started talking about because I've recently started. I'm looking for a psychiatrist, and I was referred by a psychologist to get ADHD treatment. And I knew when I was a kid I was diagnosed with it, um, probably around the age of somewhere between 9 and 12. Um, and this would have been mid 80s,
Hmm.
and 84, 85, 86, something like that. So no, it'd been later 80s. So 87, 88. Anyway, near 87 to 90, somewhere in there. And, I remember vividly because I've had Adderall, especially, when I went to college late um, after the military. And, it did this amazing thing where I could like pinpoint focus, even if it wasn't for more than a couple, 3 hours, but it was something that would like literally like this is how normal people feel. Like it immediately changed my perspective. And luckily, I don't have it around me, so it's not something I can get, but I'm working on it now to get that prescription and start changing that aspect of my life because I'm 47 now and getting older doesn't help either with the symptoms and outcomes of ADHD, especially at my age. So, and the reason I was never treated as a child was because it was kind of one of those pray it away kind of things. One, my parents didn't understand it, being in their probably early 30s at that point in the late 80s. Science and religion were really kind of at odds with each other. And, um, I mean, aren't they always? But, they were very evangelical then and very strict and very religious. And if it was unless it was something that was killing you, it was something you could pray away. So, and even then sometimes, we went on a search for the church, which was most of my adolescence.
So
We
they
went to
went
every.
to a bunch of different churches.
Oh yeah, yeah, I call it the search for the church. And it's, it started off as not my mother's recovering Catholic, and my father was he was not religious at all until he was. And then it was because he was going down that wrong path when he was an adolescent. And he found his way to not being in prison for the rest of his life through uh faith. And it's a really cool story, his story. But and then he met my mother and they were like hippies in the late 60s, early 70s, and they met on a beach in California at a love yourself, love Jesus kind of thing. And then they moved to Texas. And then, that's where I was born. My brother was born. And but when they got to Texas, it wasn't so much hippy dippy stuff anymore, free love or, the love of Jesus. It started slowly because, and I noticed it because, I was inundated with the church until from the very beginning, where my father was working. He was the head wrangler at a preeminent uh, Christian camping experience
Okay.
in East Texas. And my mother was head of the kitchen facilities there. And so I was born in a Christian camp. And my whole life, that was until I was 12, I really wasn't allowed to listen to anything but contemporary Christian
Hmm.
by myself. If I was, my mom and dad had a massive record collection. And if they're listening to music, we can listen to whatever they're listening to. But for my brother and I, we were really pretty kept tight on what we could listen to and what we could watch.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, I had the
you
same
know,
experience. There was
mhm,
some Christian music that I listened to because my parents listened to it, but I didn't have any
right.
way to like listen to anything.
I mean, we had the radio, and mom, after the Christian camp, my brother and I were at, in our early tweens, we uh mom was usually working in town at that point, and then dad was he was training horses, or he had his own little art studio, and so he was busy, so we were listening to whatever we wanted to. We had our boom box, and we could go out. We lived in the country, and between dawn and dusk, as long as we got our choring done, we were free, unless school or we're at school. But in the summer times, it was there was no parental oversight. Let's put it that way. In the late '80s and early '90s, it was children were basically pagan heathen running around half naked. Street light comes on. If you had a street light, then you knew it was time to go home. But we had hundreds of acres around us of farmland and cattle ranches. So it was roam however you wanted to. And my father especially, was very, very much for that.
Well, that's cool that
Um,
you had that kind of freedom, at least in that way,
yeah, absolutely. We could
especially
go
with the
wherever we
radio.
wanted. Yes. Well, the radio, we definitely had, I definitely had a stockpile of contraband tapes and eventually CDs. I got in trouble, big trouble, when the NWA album first came out, and I got the tape of that. My buddy Jeremiah and I, at the time, I think I was
Wait, what's NWA?
the Straight Outta Compton album.
That's
Uh,
rap.
I, yeah, Ice Cube. Yeah, it was Easy E, Ice Cube. Golly, who else? Uh, I think Dre was involved. Yeah, Dr. Dre. The
Okay.
the early days before what's it called? Death Row Records and things of that nature. They were the ones that really brought out the West Coast gangster rap, and it hit in Texas, and I was in middle school when that came out, and my buddy Jeremiah got the tape. His parents weren't having any of it, so we would pass it between us at school and make copies. But we got in deep trouble for that. But once I turned 13, it was like my dad's like, okay, you're basically a man now, and spankings turned into boxing matches, and um, he wasn't brutal, but stuff that my parents did as far as punishments back then were, uh, well, they get CPS called on you today, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah,
like I said,
you talking about the radio brought up a memory. Like, my mom would go to the grocery store, and
mhm,
we were not allowed to go to the grocery store because there might be like magazines or like bad stuff in there that we weren't allowed to see.
yeah,
So, when she would leave, we would get the radio and tune it to Radio Disney
yes,
and like have one kid like as the lookout for when she got back. And we would like listen to the radio for however long that took. And that was like, if they had found out we were doing that, we would have been in so much trouble.
yeah. Yeah, we had like little Disney things, like a little Disney record player, like something the grandparents had gave us like a Christmas when we were little. But outside of that, we had no real our public my brothers and I contraband was never made public, but when it was found, it was destroyed. Um but when I turned 13, it was that shifted. Um I don't know why. I guess it got too big to really punish corporally without being brutal about it. And then my brother was there right behind me, and we were both big country kids. And but we were good, and we did what we were told all the time. And life for us was, like I said, search for the church was one of the things. But in the middle school years, say fifth through eighth grade, it was church after church after church after church. And it was everything from faith healing and talking in tongues to, mom trying Catholicism one more time. And it wasn't until my teenage years that we settled in to the Episcopal Church.
Okay.
And my mother actually started working for the church at that point. And uh and she was one of the choir masters. And then I started, I was one of the acolytes on Sunday mornings, get the kids with the white robes to carry all the standards and whatnot. And then and move stuff around for the priests during the sermons or the services.
I'm
And
curious, what does Episcopal ch like service look like? Do they have
it's very similar to a Catholic service.
so a lot of
Very similar.
chanting?
No, 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 not so much of that, and nothing in Latin or anything like that. The Episcopal Church is an offshoot of I think, the Anglican Church, which is one of the first Protestant churches that split from Catholicism. Um,
Hymn singing or sermons or
there's
what?
there's usually it starts with a processional, like everybody's in the church, and then there's a processional, and the priests and the acolytes all go up onto the stage and the choir sings and there's an organ, and then the priests go to the back and the acolytes go to the sides, and then the first speaker comes up and says a bunch of stuff and everybody stands up and they repeat a bunch of stuff, and then it's been a while, so
Yeah,
um and then singing, and then more stuff repeated, and then singing, and then more stuff repeated, and then the sermon, and then the Episcopal Church does bread and wine uh every weekend, every Sunday, just like the Catholic Church does, but all are invited as opposed to only Catholics.
I
Um,
see. That's the one thing that always like made me think Catholicism is such a weird cult because it's like they, I mean, the rhetoric is that you're basically eating flesh and drinking blood. And I'm like,
yeah,
what?
transubstantiation of Christ's body and his blood. And then it comes from, and I think his last supper with him and his disciples, and he tells them to eat of his body and blood, and it'll be part of them. And it was metaphorical, but the idea of the transubstantiation, and it's a magical thought. It is paradoxical in the sense that people don't really believe that, but that's kind of what it's meant to be. So
I mean,
you
yeah,
know
people don't really believe it, but if you look at what they're actually saying, like that is what they like. It's just like, okay, so you guys are vampires?
I know I would say that sort of thing is, or the idea of transubstantiation, the transformation of something mundane into something sacred, um, even water into wine for that matter. I think that's something that probably permeates most big religions. I think that's probably something you'll see in, well, definitely in uh, the Old Testament or the Hebrew Bible, the
Yeah.
Torah. It's something you'll definitely see in Islam as well. In the oh God, what's their book called? Sorry, my brain goes dead sometimes when I'm trying to think of things.
Oh no, it's fine. Is
Then I
it
try to find,
Quran?
yeah, the Quran. And there's one right over there on my shelf, and I could have just looked over to the right. And then there's, you know, um, the idea of mysticism in the Hindu religions. Absolutely, it's in ancient Japanese and Chinese religions, and the animistic religions, of indigenous peoples not touched by uh, white or Asian societies. You have transubstantiation, I think, kind of throughout. So it's not something that's singular to Christianity at all. It's kind of something that kind of permeates. Not maybe the cannibalism aspect of it, that's kind of weird, but um, transubstantiation in and of itself, and I could be absolutely freaking wrong, and there's probably be some biblical scholar or theological scholar saying, "Shut the fuck up," and he's probably right or they're right. Anyways, that's
No,
my
yeah,
understanding.
that sounds correct to me. Do you find that since you were like, do you find that you've studied theology a lot as a way to sort of like understand what you were experiencing when you were a kid?
Oh, 1,000%. And it's fascinating too because, like I said, when I was younger, my parents had they even had Dianetics on the shelf, but they had Dianetics on the shelf, but they had Greek mythology, they had Asian mythology. My dad was huge into Native American and indigenous mythology in North America, especially the plains and uh, northeastern indigenous tribes. So, and there was a lot of books on Native American shamanism. The stuff was all over the place. But by the time I became a teenager, that stuff had all disappeared. I had squirreled away the Greek mythology and the Roman mythology because I was always a fan of
Hmm.
those stories. Um, but like even books like on King Arthur and stuff were no longer on the shelves, and it was mostly filled up with like books the church said they should read. And this is also before the Episcopal Church, so that time frame in the search for the church, um, when we were going everywhere, those books started to disappear. The books on other people in other places, and
Hmm.
was replaced with whatever focus on the family said they should read this weekend.
No,
So,
the reason I ask about the Episcopalian service, like what it's like,
mhm.
is one of the criteria for a cult is using mind-altering practices such as meditation, chanting, speaking in tongues.
Oh, sure,
Um,
absolutely. But there's none of the speaking in tongues unless you count it as actually speaking in another dialect, like an actual language. And then I think there might be some Latin in there, but it's all in English. But it's the same, it's the Lord's Prayer. It's the one Holy Catholic and the Nicene Creed, um, which are standard, and I think even in Methodist and Lutheran churches. So it's across the board. In the more Anglican, I think the more Anglican side of Protestantism, and then I don't think my dad was ever a real fan of the Episcopal Church. He didn't really take part in a lot of it.
I
My
see.
mom worked. My mom worked there, and it was kind of mandatory that every Wednesday night we went to youth group. Um, it was mandatory until we could start driving and working ourselves. Like when 13 was like when the corporal punishment stopped. 16 was like, okay, go get a job.
Hmm.
And when that happened, I had complete freedom. Like it was really kind of spooky because I went from a lot of control to it's like, oh, now he's gonna go and get a job and big. I grew up in a teeny little town with about 900 people, and so going to Tyler, which at that point only had like 80,000, maybe less, 75,000 maybe. And so it was a big town compared to where I grew up, and it was the only place to get a job. So you were driving to town 30 minutes either way.
Hmm.
And as soon as I turned 16, my dad bought me like a $400 Ford Escort hatchback, and he said, you've got 1 month's insurance in the dash, and a full tank of gas. How you keep all those things going is up to you. So it was immediately get a job and get out. And by the time I was 17, I had actually moved out of the house entirely. But I still had to do the chore in around the house, taking care of the horses, cleaning stalls, mucking out the stalls, cleaning the paddock. It was morning and evening chores until I was 18. That's what I had to do every day.
Wow.
Even though I was renting a room from my best friend's mom for $50 a week when I turned 17.
That's
So,
crazy. So you still had to go do like all that stuff
oh,
even though you weren't
absolutely.
living there.
100%. 100%. Um, and on top of having a job and being in sports, you know, all the way across. So it was, and then trying to keep my grades up and everything. But but that was kind of the cutoff. The only thing I really did after that with the church was youth group, and that was more because of our friends and the youth pastor let us smoke. So you know, stuck around with that till I was about 18, and then even probably until I was 19, and that was even it. It was even kind of cultish because it was sure we would you literally get together and people would go off and do things. It was real loose, But there was also the singing aspect of it and the worship aspect of it that was mandatory as well. And that started off the whole thing. And then usually after that, there was like some sort of meal, and then it was hangout time until people got tired or needed to go home, go to school or whatever next day. Real loose. But the worship aspect still was there. But it was for me, and this is the thing I thought one of the things we wanted to talk about. I never remember in my entire history of being in the church that I felt anything like, even when I was little, like there was never that mystical wonder for me as a kid. Like
like
it
a
just
religious experience where you
not at
felt
all.
like,
I've never felt any kind of religious experience. Um, I felt the hysteria of being with a bunch of teenage kids and in a church camp setting where, everybody starts, belting out their, oh, what's your biggest, darkest secret or whatever, and they were crying in a circle, etc. That stuff happens. And you don't need Jesus or the church there to make that happen. That's something people can do without all that stuff. Um,
yeah, that's one of these under mind altering practices. This is a list from the International Cultic Studies Association website.
Mhm.
A psychologist PhD made this list of cult criteria, and meditation, chanting, speaking in tongues, denunciation sessions, and debilitating work routines are used in excess and serve to suppress doubts about the group and its leaders. So that would be denunciation sessions, basically, where you have to say
you're kind of
something,
breaking down. Yeah.
make yourself
Yeah.
feel bad about yourself so that you can be saved by the whatever it is that they're pushing.
And that's exactly what it was. It was like, share your shame so we can shame you and then give you forgiveness, and but only through him. So yeah, absolutely. And then everybody's crying and everybody then there's more singing and then whatever.
Yeah, and
So
that's emotional manipulation, really.
no, 100%. And when you're kids, you don't know. I mean, it's grooming in and of itself.
Oh
Um,
yeah, absolutely. So did
my
you go ahead?
my experiences, there was never any abuse for me at the church. So I never had a physically or overtly uh mentally abusive issues. It was just control. It
Hmm.
was just, you have to do this, you have to live by these standards. And I did. And I wore the mask and I smiled and I showed up to all the stuff that dad and mom wanted me to show up to and said all the right things. But then there was this one time, and it was the most telling time of all. It was like, my mom had signed me up to do like the kids, not kids, but acolytes got like the opportunity to lead a sermon, and I got signed up on the list, and I just couldn't do it. It's like, there is nothing in this book that I'm going to tell you people that you haven't heard for your entire freaking lives in a million different ways. I just couldn't honestly bring myself to do it. It just, there was no honesty in me to do it. And I backed out like at the last minute. And they're like, this happens all the time. We've got a backup ready to go. Not a kid, but the preacher had a backup sermon just in case. So it wasn't a
Right.
big deal, but it was that point I was like, I can't do this. I don't want to do this. And I'd done everything. I was even confirmed in the Episcopal Church. I did all the learning and all the rites and all that stuff to be confirmed. Very much like what they do in the Catholic Church with people have to be baptized and then confirmed within the Catholic Church, I think, to take communion. So it's like that in the Episcopal Church, but they still do communion for everybody. It doesn't matter if you're confirmed or not. It's just more of a status. Like, I guess you have to be
Right.
confirmed to later go into the priesthood. And the priesthood in Episcopal Church is having a lot of issues right now, but back then it was one of the only ones, I think, maybe Lutherans, maybe Methodists, that had female priests and had priests that married. And in our case, we even had a gay priest. And this would have been the late 90s in Tyler, which is fucking crazy.
That's
So
pretty progressive.
yeah, extremely progressive. It's tightened its belt down over the last several years, but that's just, I think, because of kind of the nationalist Christian movement that's moving through the US right now. So,
Yeah. Did you find there was like a certain point in your life where you started questioning like the things that you were taught in the church as far as
oh, I always did.
about God or
When I was a kid, I just didn't understand it. It didn't make any sense to me. It's just this is what you're supposed to do, and this is why you do it. And at that point, they keep everything really abstract and really generalized, right? You don't start getting that real proper training until you get like in the middle school age. And at that point when we were doing search for the church, we were one church called Grace, and they had and I think it might be a national thing called the Kiwanis, which is where you get like it's like Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts, but you get pins and medals for learning Bible verses and sharing
okay.
scripture and learning songs, being able to recite entire Bible verses, just wrote. And I hated that shit.
That sounds
Hated it.
terrible.
It was it was the worst. I didn't want to be there. I didn't want to wear the stupid shirt, and I sure as shit didn't give a care about getting buttons for Bible verses. First of all, I had ADHD, and I wasn't just going to sit there and read the Bible and figure something out for whatever. My parents had completely thrown that under the bus. My dad was like, I've seen him play video games for hours, and he doesn't move. Not understanding that video games are a dopamine fix for an ADHD person. Um, Crazy music can be for me. It's a dopamine fix for me. Um, but there's so many ways and I didn't learn about that stuff until I started teaching public
Mm-hmm.
schools, and you have to be aware of all of those things because you have kids with learning issues like that in your classroom with kids that don't have learning issues. So you have to be prepared for across the board, even autism. And that's when I started my actual adult search into, is this really something that I have, and is something that I need to find out? And then talk to psychologists, talking to psychiatrists, like absolutely, and you need help. So it's only took 40 years.
Yeah, I think
Um,
when I worked in elementary school and then later at middle school, it was actually a really healing experience for me because just being around kids and like the issues that they're dealing with, it kind of if you haven't been sort of like looking into your own childhood and like working on that through therapy, it kind of like is a mirror for things. So like being so isolated as a kid and like seeing how
mm,
kids interact in groups was just like it really helped me to be less reserved and to be able to express my own personality more in my own friendships because
mm,
um yeah, I was just like so completely isolated that I really have struggled in my adult life with just having a social life at all because of the extreme um, isolation that I went through.
mm.
But yeah, working with kids has it can really be helpful for
It
older
was
people.
definitely helpful for me. Um, but it also helped me realize that it was not for me. Um,
Same.
you know, uh, I'm a year out of it now, and they just made it so that kids can't have cell phones in class at all anymore in Texas. They're not even supposed to have them on campus unless it's with the health issues or something like that, or they have to leave it in their car, leave it in a safe box wherever. Because the school I was at doesn't even have lockers anymore. Kids have to carry everything, but it's mostly laptop. They don't carry like a monster load of books.
Right.
Um,
So what do you consider yourself to be now, like in your adult life? Are you more agnostic or atheist
um,
or
I don't like. I
have
don't.
you
I
come
don't
back
know that I.
around to some sort of faith or like
I'm a big fan. I think I'll always be a big fan of the actual like red letters, the teachings of Christ. Um, Guy was a cool dude, good guy, and feel the same way like about the Buddha, and their teachings are very similar. And that might not be an accident. If Jesus was alive, Buddha had been alive before him at that point. He could have learned the teachings in the 30 years that he wasn't available for the Bible. So, and I've heard people say that before. I don't know if that's real. I'm not going to spout that off as fact ever, but that could have been a thing. because in the Middle East was especially the coastal Middle East and Mediterranean at that point, Israel and the Sudetenland, everything from basically northern Egypt all the way up into Turkey, was big time trade. So they had trade from all over the Middle East and Eastern Asia. That includes um, even China at that point. So, and probably not Japan, but the teaching of Buddha, the Hindu teachings of the Buddha, would have definitely been something that was apparent in that time in that area. So it's not something that would have been alien. And the Romans didn't give a shit, and they controlled it. So um, who knows?
Well, that's really
Spe-
cool. Yeah.
speculation. But I gave a friend once a book called Jesus on Buddha, and then underneath it said Buddha on Jesus, and it was literally taking red letter scripture and then comparing it to stanzas from Buddhist teachings, and they're not identical, but if they're translated even a little bit wrong, they would come out in the wash. So a lot of likenesses. Regardless, my personal faith is agnostic. Um, and I think because really it comes down to kind of a 50-50 thing. Either there is some sort of force out there that has some sort of governing power, or what people can call whatever they want. They call it magic, they call it chi, they call it God, gods plural, etc. That exists, or it doesn't, right? So, and it's not like me betting on one side or the other. It's like I'm more romantic about the existence of something like that than I am about the non-existence, because at that point the non-existence begs its own existential dread. And nobody wants to think about, well, this is just it until you go black. So
Right.
and then you start worrying about the things that philosophers have worried about for thousands of years. So, and that doesn't do you any good. So,
Right.
so but it could teach you to be a better human being, because if there is no uh, force that's governing us to be good or do good or whatever, humanism. I'm a big fan of humanism. Actually, I think that as humans, we not only have a responsibility to each other, but to the environment, to the world around us, because it's necessary for us to live. Nobody discovered America, right? It was here with hundreds of indigenous tribes before white settlers came and
Oh
stole it.
yeah, absolutely.
And you live in Hawaii. That is, I mean, the same thing across
Oh
the board.
yeah, Hawaiians consider their republic or their kingdom to be under illegal occupation to this day.
Absolutely. Yeah. And good for them. They're not wrong. It
No,
was,
legally that it's I think there was some treaties that were gone back on and it just kind of they just kept
well, yeah, par for
having
the
people.
course, par for the course in manifest destiny and colonialism. But these people had multiple languages, multiple systems of government. They had multiple religious views and aspects. Um, and I forgot where I was going with this.
Oh, just I think we were just got off on that topic because we were talking about how people
Oh, humanism.
get
Um,
out of
but people across the world, regardless of their manufacturing capability, their technological capabilities, have had the same morals, right? The same, you should probably
right.
shouldn't kill people. You probably shouldn't steal from other people, because when you do those things, it just leads to more stealing and killing, right? It doesn't take a list from a god on a piece of stone to tell you that those things are wrong. And then half of them are just about how not to piss him off.
Right.
So
And
it's
that's
like,
kind of where I'm at with like the higher power is that it's some kind of it's like an abstract concept that humans have to sort of be able to personify their own internal like system of morality.
Oh yes, absolutely. Because the argument you hear a lot, especially from the Christians, the Christian side is, well, without Christianity, you wouldn't have any morals at all. It's like your morals only exist because Christianity exists. And I'm like, that's fucking bullshit. If
Yeah, because
you
even little kids have some sort of idea of like not hurting others and like,
right, they can sense and see cruelty. And that's innate in human beings. And it doesn't take, like I said, some, you know, dude with the beard in the sky to tell you that that's the right or wrong thing to do when you can see it, you can hear it, you can feel it. If you have any kind of sympathy or empathy, which most people should, you see another person in pain, it should give you pause, right? Or and
right,
it should, and especially if you're involved in it in some way. And that doesn't take doesn't take a religion to make that a moral fact.
right.
And I
So
think that comes back. Go ahead.
do you still have family members that are in that church today? And if so, like, do you talk to them?
My father, before he passed, was pretty big in the church, and he was very evangelical. We had a good relationship for the most part. Um, my mother is not religious. She now she her and her husband now live in Albuquerque, New Mexico. He grew up Jewish. He's Jewish, and
Hmm.
my mother is grew up Catholic, but she is agnostic, and she's like a lot of old white ladies in the West. She's all about indigenous, uh, like a bunch of old progressive ladies in the West. She's very much about the indigenous religions and populations and things of that nature. And it'd be kind of annoying about it because she's as lily white as they come. So, um, just it's not quite to the point of what's the word I'm looking for? Stealing their uh,
Cultural appropriation.
that's it. And it's not quite there, but it's like, mom, settle down. Um, yeah, they had a bunch of great ideas. They knew how to live with nature and commune, and I think that's kind of where I was going with the humanism point was that when people live in harmony with nature, like most indigenous peoples do, and are kind of forced to, but they learn how to do it magnificently without taking more from the land than they need, and also giving back to it in as much as they possibly can. And that's that kind of agrarian, dare I say, communist idea is terrifying to uh, systems of control. And that's what the church is. It's a system of control.
Absolutely.
Um, it, and that's one of the reasons that made it so easy for the white settlers to call people savages because they're agrarian, communistic, a good tide raises all ships kind of aspect was not. And even at that point, royalty that the United States came from, but where colonizers mostly came from, most of Europe, which was run by royalty in some way or another, was hugely capitalistic towards the royals or oligarchical. And it eventually all became about money. But you can mask money with Jesus all the time. I mean, in God we trust is on our money. So,
Right.
um, even
So,
though the enumerations and the First Amendment are very clear that church and state should be separated in this country, especially. I mean, the country was founded on leaving religion behind, fascinatingly, by a bunch of very conservative Puritans who were not happy with the Church of England being as liberal as it was. They actually left England because they wanted to be more harsh. But
right.
they wanted to be free from religious control, and they wanted to be free from royalty, and they wanted to be free from
Taxes. Look where
essentially.
look where that ended up.
And where are we now? So yeah, absolutely.
Oh my gosh.
Full circle, right back around to tariffs and things of that nature, right? I think the final straw in the taxation without representation for the Americans via the British was like a 3% or 4% sales tax on tea,
Right.
3 or 4%. And we're seeing things like 25%, 50%, 100% on tariffs right now. And it's like, how do you fucking deal with this? We're not throwing the
Yeah,
tea into
not
the
to
sea.
mention personal income tax.
Absolutely. Everything across the board. It's absolutely true. But I think, but again, it all stems from these systems of control. And so to some
Yeah.
extent, if there's not a system of control, then you have chaos. Even the indigenous tribes that I talked about, they had some formal system of control, some hierarchy of people, whether it was like a triumvirate or a matriarchy or an oligarchy or whatever. Not oligarchy, but
There
even
has to be some kind of structure, maybe not some kind of control, but some kind of structure. Or
right,
yeah, then you just have anarchy. But
right.
but this is always where the conversation ends up when we have these kind of talks, at least so
Mm-hmm,
far for me, is okay, so we have all these systems of control and
mm-hmm,
like, oh wait, what about governments? And like
100%.
you were in
Yeah.
the military. What kind of mind
Oh
control
God.
tactics did they use?
Well, that's what boot camp is. Boot camp's entire purpose is to take a civilian and turn them into a soldier, sailor, airman, whatever, a Marine. Um,
What branch were you in?
I was Navy, so Navy, and I think different branches are different. Well, I don't think I know for a fact different branches have different time in uh, boot camp. So for us, it was 8 weeks, but then I think like the Marines is 16, maybe Army's 14, and I think I don't know. I don't know. I know ours was 2 months. And that's the 2 months when you get in there from the day that you get in there, you're literally stripped down to nothing in front of everybody you're going to be around for the next 2 months. And then you're built back up. And I'm in both literally and figuratively, mentally and physically, you are stripped down and built back up to be what leave the civilian behind and become the the tool that you're supposed to become. Um, in the older days, say the early 40s, 50s, 60s, our World War Ones, World War Twos, Korea, Vietnam era, the boot camp was brutal. There were no humanitarian rules. You would get hit, you would get cussed, you would get beaten. In the 80s, 90s, and into the 2000s, that shifted dramatically. Um, People started complaining, and when you start complaining, people start looking into it. And once there were oversight committees, the brutality in boot camp dropped and diminished dramatically.
Well, that's
Unfortunately,
good, I guess.
it's good to a point. The thing that it doesn't do so well is get you ready for war. And that's kind of what the purpose of boot camp is. It's to get you ready for war and for you to understand that everything you're going to do until you leave is either in direct uh, correlation to said war, killing, or you're supporting that from the rear in some way. Even if you're just the dude doing the cooking or the gal who's sending the letters and receiving them in the mailroom, you're responsible, you're culpable across the board. You're part of that effort, even if you don't ever fire a bullet. You're supporting someone who does. So that
Right.
culpability, that idea, is something that has to be kind of hammered in through the aspects of it. And there's a lot. Boot camp is a lot of hoorah, fucking red, white, and blue. Uniform code of military justice, which is in a completely different legal system for the military um, that you have to learn. Um,
Yeah, it definitely checks a lot of these criteria off.
oh,
I mean,
100%. It's very cultish in its aspect, but the thing where that kind of there's no religious aspect to it. The military is, and in my experience, offered the offered religion if you were someone that had a person of faith. There were services that you could go to, but there was nothing mandatory about religion in the United States military. Nothing at all. In fact, the less probably religious you are and the more you make the military your religion, the better off you're going to be in that sense. And that's, there is probably not a single day that I don't wish that I had served the entire 20 years and then retired. But it came to after 7 years or 6.5 years, and we had just getting into 2004, 2005, and the wars are finally kind of stuff's going starting to drop as far as activity, at least in Afghanistan, but there was more going on in Iraq at that point. And um, I was done. Didn't want to do it anymore. I wanted to go actually into film at that point,
Hmm.
and but then ended up in art school. So, you know, and I left, and when I was leaving, you know, the only reason I was allowed to is because the rate that I was in the United States Navy was at 110% capacity, so they didn't need more people. Um, they're like, yeah, you get to go. I got a 30-day early out with what did they call it? Um, my actual separation wasn't until April. I got out in November of '04, but my actual separation wasn't until April, and I could, in case of emergency, be called back up until that point. So I was, told to keep it loose until then. And but they I can't remember. I did have some financial assistance at that point, so I just can't remember how it all worked out. Anyways, got out, highly decorated. They wanted to take me back to the Gulf and make me reenlist, or not make me reenlist. They wanted me to reenlist in the Gulf so I get a huge bonus tax free. Because at that point, if you're reenlisted in the Gulf, you're in a war zone. Your entire bonus would be yours tax free, and they paid us to stay. Um, I said no, thank you. And they sent you to this 1 week school when you're separating, where they teach you about the world. Because when I went in at 20, I knew shit. I'd been working on the economy at that point for about 3 years, 4 years. Um, but I didn't know anything about the world. Like, I was a registered Republican because my parents were.
Hmm.
Um, that's all I knew. That's what I was supposed to do. Right.
Wow,
I had
1 week to debrief from 7 years of indoctrination.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Then that's a wild reason why a lot of these guys, when they get out, there is a lot of PTSD, but there's a lot of separation trauma from the military, because it provides you with everything you need. And it's one of the ways that they keep you there. It's like no matter how bad it gets, you'll have a roof over your head. You might not be able to pay for your families, or you might be on food stamps, even as a military, which is ridiculous.
Mm,
But you will always have the opportunity, especially if you're active duty. You will have basically complete protection, roof over your head, three squares, somewhere to sleep, and medical, dental, and vision across the board, and for your family. So it's a in peacetime it's a fucking hell of a gig, but in wartime it will destroy you.
hmm.
Because that's what war does. All the worst things that are human are turned up to 11 in war. And I am at this point extremely anti-war. Um,
I am too.
I can't, and I love to play video games, but I won't play games that are realistic to a war environment. Um,
Well, a lot of those games, the war games, are like Call of Duty, I think was the first one. I could be wrong, maybe it was called something else, but it was developed by the military as a training tool.
there's a bunch of them. It's not unknown. And then the ones that you play today are so hyper realistic that they got boring, and they had to change them to make them more violent and crazy. So I don't know. They definitely cater to certain people. I know a lot of guys like me that play that were in the military and they don't like it either. But then there are other guys like me that are not like me that are in the military and they absolutely love it. So that's kind of one of those things. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think those all of those things go to some sort of, and then again, it goes back to systems of control. And of course, the government is probably the worst. Any government, because at some point it comes down to who's at the top and who's at the bottom, and how do you keep them that way? So even if it's not that black and white, even in your better governments and say some like Norway, where people are supposedly the happiest in the world, right? But they have a government that is in control and they pay taxes and they do all these things. So, in effect, you're paying into the control system just by being any kind of consumer, like we talked about earlier.
Right.
So,
So
kind of Britain.
how do we like as a species like how because we have like this is how I see it. Like all of these governments, each country is like its own little death cult and they're all engaged in this sort of global uh
Well, I think
construct
it's
where they have to like there has to be some kind of like each country has to maintain a military because there's this constant fear of
oh, your nuclear arsenal for that matter, especially at the
right.
top.
So I mean
Um,
at what point are we going to be able to evolve beyond like needing to kill each other?
I don't think it's possible. I really don't. I think it's the science pragmatic logical part of me is like we're animals and animals will war for territory. Chimps do it. Uh, Shoot, they'll eat each other. So if you want to go back to the cannibalism thing, and
Catholicism.
yeah, the transubstantiation. But when a chimp kills another chimp and then eats his face, it's not because he wants to be Jesus. So, um, but yeah, primates go to war. Humans, as greater primates, for all intents and purposes, we are territorial. Um, we are physically bred to be patriarchal in a lot of ways, especially when it comes to violence. The biggest threat to women has always been men, period. Um, that's not conjecture or hyperbole. The biggest threat to women is men across the board. Safe
Yeah, I
places.
mean, my brother
It's
says
not.
it like this. He says, so where we came from is basically whoever could rape the most was like the most physically superior. So that's where we come from is that sort of thing. And he's not wrong.
He's not wrong. It's trained for beyond written history, literally, into myth and legend. I mean, you have Zeus coming down as a goose and raping women, or a bull, or a golden shower, right? Fucking crazy
Yeah.
shit.
So like what's the solution? Matriarchal uh
I mean, I don't know, but I think that is one of the things that, as we've advanced as a more a cerebral society away from a more aggressive society, even though war is still pretty prevalent. We're on the cusp right now of World War III. It's fucking crazy. So, um,
yeah.
while I say all these things like our brains are getting bigger and we're becoming more emotional or more empathetic, starting to listen to more people. I mean, again, more people are connected than ever before. And every day, more people are connected ever before than the day before that. I mean, that's how fast information is flowing now.
Hmm.
And with the rise of AI and things of this nature, the human experience is going to become something that's, I don't know, maybe couture in the near future, because the last South Park made a pretty nasty jab at AI and people using Chat GPT as kind of uh, an emotional crutch.
Oh, oh my God, it's so strange. Like I was talking to somebody and recently um and they like asked me on a date and I'm like chatting with them and I'm like this is a little weird because like every response has like those M dashes in it and I'm like wait this guy is literally like I'm talking to a large language model. I'm not talking to the
That's
person
fucking
that I
weird.
think I'm talking. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's stuff happening so fast right now in AI and robotics. There's things that are happening in human modifications. Bionics is no longer a sci-fi word. These things are real. You could Google right now the girl with the arms that she could control her hands from across the room with her Bluetooth. And she
Yeah, I
has,
saw that the other day.
yeah, that's right now. And like again, that's just what we see and what we know, and not what governments are working on behind doors. And that's not just technology, but genetics uh, across the board. We are on the next big step, like literally about to step off, I guess, the cliff into whatever the fuck is next
Yeah.
if we don't blow ourselves up first. So the human experience might just become that, a human experience in maybe 100 years. Because, there are films like, what was the one? It was called Her, and it starred Joaquin Phoenix and Scarlett Johansson. And
I didn't
Joaquin
see that
Phoenix,
one.
it's set in the not so distant future where you can basically get an AI partner, and um, the AIs are new, and eventually the AIs just decide to leave the planet because people are fucked like crazy. Like he has this relationship with this AI. The AI, like there's even like I don't want to say there's a sex worker service
Hmm.
that where if you have a relationship with this AI, the AI can then pick a sex worker based on what you think that AI looks like. And it's fucking really weird and morally and ethically asks a lot of incredible questions.
Oh, I'll
But
have to check it out.
at the
Is
end of
that
the
a
movie, the AI,
spaceship?
no, it's on Earth. It's just set on Earth, just like normal people.
No, I
Oh,
mean,
that's
is that a
it's
spaceship behind you?
no, that is a spaceship. It's an X-wing, Star Wars.
Oh, okay,
Um,
cool.
um, but yeah, I think the human element in things is already starting to disappear, and that started in the '80s when workforces were started to be being replaced by robots. That was a real thing that happened in the car companies. It was one of the reasons that Detroit fell, right? So now that's happening. China has entire what they call dark warehouses where robots are making shit and there's no lights. They don't need them.
Oh,
They're just
ew, that's creepy.
yeah, that's crazy, right? You'll see
Ugh.
the sparks or whatever while the robots do whatever work or creating, building whatever they're building. But yeah, they're called like dark warehouses. It's there's so much happening so fast technologically, and AI is a big worry. Um, for a lot of different reasons, but that we probably shouldn't get into. But I mean, we've all seen Terminator, I
Yeah.
would think, and so that could be a possibility. It's probably way far out there on the list of possibilities, but you may have possibilities: rogue AI shutting down banking systems or doing weird stuff like that, which could send an entire country or the entire world into absolute chaos. And other countries not that are not as ethically or morally bound as we say we are, uh, they're not going to stop. They're going to weaponize AI, which means we have to weaponize AI if we're going to
Right.
keep up. There's an entirely new arms race about to just explode as well. So
Yeah, the new arms race is basically AI.
it's going to be online. So if it doesn't turn into fucking robots, who knows? Anyway,
Yeah, well,
uh,
coming back around to sort of like the mind control thing and how we how we become more of ourselves instead of what we are sort of
yeah.
programmed to be. Like, what are some ways that you have either freed yourself from something like a certain thought system or what's something that you do on a regular basis that helps you to sort of deprogram yourself? Do you have a routine that you do? Like for me, it's being outside, like
Mhm.
hiking or going to the beach or whatever. I find that just helps me to disconnect from those things, and then also just doing
Well,
talk
I would
therapy.
say it's very similar. Yeah, I am in therapy. Um, but I think one of the things you spoke to kind of there was a lot of physicality, like getting getting moving. I was a power lifter for most of my life. Um, I work in a very physically rigorous job, and I've always had that work ethic. I like working with my hands, and when I'm in that environment, it does allow me to be free to an extent. I guess Zen, meditation, I can't do it. My brain doesn't shut off unless I'm not still. When I'm not still, if I'm working towards a goal, a specific one, um, even if that goal is to get from the bottom of the hill to the top and back down again, or to lift, deadlift 500 pounds, those things are goals that, and maybe goals is the word I'm looking for. Maybe goals is the answer to define yourself. Like, what personal goals do you set for yourself? Why do you set those goals, right? Is it
Hmm.
because it's something you like to do? Is it something that fulfills you? Well, if those goals fulfill you, if those goals are something that you like to do, how does that, I guess, translate into personal freedom and happiness? And
Yeah, kind
of
of like
course,
your identity, because I think in these groups, a lot of
yeah.
times we are, and especially when we're kids, if we're in these environments where we're told who we are,
Hmm.
we kind of lose sight of who we actually are, and so like we have to rebuild our identity. So when you
Hmm.
set goals for yourself, you're saying, this is the kind of person that I want to be. This is the kind of
Yes,
person I will be, and then you make that happen, and that's kind of like how you rebuild your or build an identity for yourself.
I think so. And that could be, I think that could be as simple or as complicated as it needs to be. Because
Right.
a lot of people are complicated people. And then a lot of people are simple people. And I don't mean that simple as stupid. I just mean simple as they don't need a lot of, either attention or bring attention to themselves. Maybe more introverted and extroverted would be a way to put that. Um,
Yeah, or maybe they just didn't have their identity destroyed when they were a kid, and so
oh,
that
well, that's true too. I think most of the well-adjusted people that I know grew up outside of the church. Some of the kindest, most loving people I know grew up outside of a religion.
Yeah, I
So
think it really affects like being
I,
brainwashed. It affects your ability to be able to trust yourself. So you're constantly second guessing yourself and the things that like, oh, do I actually want to do that? Or um so being able to trust yourself again is when you set goals and then you achieve that goal, then
right,
you're building that trust in yourself. Like, oh, I can actually
right,
trust that I'm going to do this thing.
right, exactly. Um, yeah, I think like I said, setting those, like you said, setting the goals and then achieving them. It's kind of like checking off a box on a personality test, right? Because, or not, or maybe if it's, or say it is like powerlifting, you never really achieve the goal because once that's set and you get there, well, then you want the next 5 pounds or the next even 2.5 pounds or maybe even 3 pounds, just to beat that last goal to reset. You care enough about that thing to try to overcome the next obstacle, whether it's self-imposed or it's an obstacle that naturally occurs.
Hmm.
So, um, that I think that kind of makes part of your personality. And those, and the physical aspects of it, we kind of, I think, we don't give them enough uh latitude because when we start thinking talking about these things, we get very cerebral and we start thinking about feelings and act and how that makes us feel and what we do when we feel this way. But one of the things I think about physical activity is that we do get the opportunity to kind of shut that off. The more lizard brain activity that it is, the more I think maybe that's kind of more of a Zen thing in and of itself. Is
So you
that
get
that
outside of those thought patterns.
yes, to just kind of eschew all the thought patterns
Yeah, and that
and
is deprogramming.
for for one specific program of your choosing at your time and place. That's the aspect of freely choosing that kind of activity. So
Yeah, that's cool because it gives me the opportunity to say that the name of the show, Mind Control, is kind of like has two meanings because in mind control, like when someone is controlling the way you think, that's like one meaning of it, but the other meaning of it is actually being in control of your own mind.
absolutely, yeah, cool. It
Yeah.
means two things.
It maybe
No, but
even
that's
more
good
than
because
two.
well, probably a dozen or more. But being in control of your own mind is something like I said, that's something I've been struggling with my whole life, and finally on the verge of getting some help for it, and that's really exciting. But it didn't take a church or anything like that for that to happen. It took me, recognizing, educating myself, and recognizing within myself to get that done. Because when the church was involved, they were like, "Well, just put your hands on the boy and say a prayer." That's not real. I don't care how much they want it to be. It's not real.
No, it's
Um,
not.
and I've never seen it to be real. So, and I've never had that experience, and I never did when I was part of that. And oh, testimonies all day long. You get the testimonies, you pray Jesus, but I'm sorry, that testimony never existed for me
hmm
ever. And uh, outside of, giving it up to the universe or whatever is equally as uh applicable, I feel. So yeah, I don't there was never any, and for me the religious experience until my adulthood was purely control.
hmm
uh, there was enmasked in love and affection and belonging, but you had to look and act and be a certain way to get that belonging, and that's bullshit.
Right.
That
And
ain't
if you didn't comply or
you were
acquiesce with,
ostracized.
you
Yeah,
were shamed, right?
shamed, ostracized, and shamed. And I was part of it. Shit, I was part of that to some people at sometimes because I had to fucking check the boxes. Unless I suffer the same fate, and that's horrible. I regret those things. That's a real thing, and that's everything from shaming people in like the LGBT community, racism, sexism across the board. Those were things that were very, very much active in my adolescence and teenage years in the
Yeah, well,
church.
it was a pattern. There were patterns that you were taught,
Oh,
and so
absolutely.
you started to mimic them. That's not really, not your fault.
Right. No, I mean, you still make decisions, and you might in
True.
my head, I still knew, those things are right and those things are wrong, but at some point you start making excuses for those things too. So because you don't want to rock the boat or de-establish the status quo. um I am much happier without those controls in my life. Like I said, there are times I miss the military because the military, as hard as it was also easy because it made it easy for you to stay alive unless you were actually in uh and by stay alive I mean that in the not warfare sense, but you were protected. Yeah,
Yeah.
you had daddy's umbrella over you at all times as long as you were serving honorably. Um, goddamn, I missed that because it was magnificent. And yeah, when these guys and girls are getting out of the military now, and they leave that 100% behind within a couple months of their separation, uh, yeah, it will break you because a lot of them went in it, shit, sometimes 17, 18 years old, and they'll get out 20 years at almost 40 and not know what it's like to be a civilian anymore. Like wake up one day and not know what the fuck to do with your life because your entire life was this one thing that you were exceptionally good at.
Right.
It's scary as fuck for a lot of people. It was scary as fuck for me. I thought I was going to handle it great. It's like, I worked on the economy before I got it, but it wasn't that. It was then you as a civilian, you're just inundated constantly. There's also the protection from information when you're in the military. Like you don't, if you, especially if you're at sea, you don't get all the cable channels. You don't get to watch the TV that people are watching. You don't get to see what's happening on. Well, in my job, we had to see. I was intelligence. So we had to see what was on the news. We had to see unclassified information in every form, especially during the wartime. So we
Oh,
had
that's really
CNN.
interesting. So most service members aren't actually like when they're actively being deployed, they're not, is it they're not allowed to or they're just not encouraged to know?
The availability doesn't exist. If
Okay.
you're forward attached, like if you're a Marine upfield, like in a forward operating base that's made out of sandbags and giant water uh, canteens that are filled again with sand, um, you don't have access to media really
Okay.
outside of what you can actually get from the command.
Okay.
If you're downfield, and even if you're say if you're in the rear with the gear, and say like one of the bases in Qatar or where else? Let's say one of the bases in Qatar, and you'll get local you'll get a lot of local stuff, but um but what you can actually get via the media there will be it won't be the whole picture unless it's your job to have the whole picture. And that's more of a just not a it's more of an availability issue. Um
Okay. Well, that's
Honestly,
interesting.
I don't know what it's like right now because
Hmm.
when I left the military, cell phones were not what cell phones are now.
Right.
Like they're far different. It was a flip phone with buttons to dial numbers, right? So there was text messaging, there wasn't really any videos. Those were brand new, like in '04, '05 when I got out of the military, and this was before the iPhone. So, and that changed everything. So, um,
Hmm. Well, that's really
now I don't
interesting.
know. I don't know if those guys take their cell phones with them downfield. I don't know if that's allowed. I mean, everybody has a cell phone, right? So I don't know if that's something that they do. I haven't
It
worked
might
with
have
any.
to be like like a special kind of phone because there's like there's location services would have to be turned off at least, right? Like
Mhm.
how would you? Because
Well, I mean, a lot of phones you can buy are already set up for worldwide use. Um, you could get a right SIM card for it, I'm sure.
I mean,
Um,
just like for intelligence purposes, like
oh, that's completely different.
from not knowing where people are.
When I first started intelligence, I was stationed in Japan, and the skiff that I worked for, the secret compartmented information floor that I worked on, in Japan, their cell phones in even in 1998 when I got there already had cameras and stuff like that, and it was not uncommon for sailors to go out and get local plans on the Japanese economy, and cell phones were strictly forbidden from the skiff floor. Like they were never allowed. Even back then, they weren't allowed.
Okay.
Because in all information at that point behind that door was not to be for public use ever. Now, that information floor also got information from all over the world, from multiple news sources, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But what it did not get was uh, on the ground information from cell phones. That not happening. It was definitely curated specifically for a wartime effort at
I
all
see.
times. So
Well, I think I've kept you over an hour.
that's true. You have. Um, well, I hope you got what you needed.
Oh,
Um,
yeah, no, this has been really great.
Good. I enjoyed it a lot. So
Yeah, if you ever want to talk again, just hit me up.
yeah, let me know if we could keep it more specific next time. And
Oh, no,
maybe
I'm not worried about keeping it like super specific. I think all these
yeah,
things are connected. And also that's just like the way I think. So, yeah, I thought it was really interesting discussion, like all the different places that we
yeah, we
went.
bounced around a bit. Well, all right. I'm gonna get out of here then. I really enjoyed it. Um,
Yeah, thank you
Look
so
forward to doing it
much.
again. Yeah, absolutely.
All right, well,
Have a
you have
great
a good
time.
Saturday.
You too.
All right,
Bye.
bye.